The Member of Parliament for Wajir South constituency is the Honourable Mohammed Adow. And guess what? He's in the studio this morning. He tried to run, but he cannot hide. Find him. He's here now. And it's always a pleasure to see you, Mohammed. Thank you for being here this morning. Good morning.
Pleasure is all mine. Good morning.
How are you doing?
Very well.
Yes?
Very well.
Like I said, it's good to see you. And you know why I've said that twice. We're looking at a number of issues this morning. Scrapping the extra vetting on ITs. It's one of the things that we'll look at today. But, let's welcome you properly. CT has a proverb from a great country today. And then you can translate that for us and, let us know what you think about it. Yeah?
Yeah.
All right.
We are in the Republic of the Gambia. I really like this, the Gambia thing. You see, other countries, just Kenya, Republic of Kenya, People's United Republic of Tanzania. This one is the Gambia.
Yeah.
Okay? The Gambia.
Yes.
There is no other Gambia.
Yeah.
Okay? Except this one. The disobedient fowl obeys in a bowl of soup.
The disobedient fowl obeys.
Yes.
Finally.
Replace fowl with chicken.
Yes.
Finally in a bowl of soup.
Abbas.
Yeah.
You've understood it perfectly. Now tell us what it means.
Yes. It's a great proverb. It means however intransigent, however uncompromising, however you are, one time, one day, you'll meet your match.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Done, dusted, packed.
Kabisa, packed, packaged, and on its way to its destination. Thank you.
African Union.
To the African Union.
Baba aende Addis Ababa.
Are you going,
That
by
is
the
the
way?
motto.
Are you one of the 100?
No, I can't afford the trip.
Oh.
Bas.
That brings up many questions, but that is not why we are here today.
We want to begin to do the Gen Z evaluation. We ask you for your watch,
Yes.
your belt, your tie.
Well, look, Mohammed,
Actually, everything I'm wearing today is from a past era.
Oh,
Not politics.
I like this guy. Why didn't you introduce me before?
well, it's the first time for everything. Look, so as we get into a number of conversations, I'm just coming off of the last conversation that we had with you, where we were looking at some things and we talked about, underdevelopment in certain areas, where we talked about, where is the, money in terms of, shareable revenue that has gone to some counties. Let's talk about Wajir, just as Wajir itself, and that who's responsible for making sure that the money that actually goes out is actually doing what it's supposed to do. So all of those conversations going on, and then we come in and have a conversation around, all right, the president was in this region over the last few days. He was there for 4 days, came to Wajir, was in Mandera, did the thing in Isiolo, was around, and he said certain things, and one of the agendas that he did talk about was development. The famous one that's going around now about, the road network. And he said he was going to sort that out. It is one thing that has been the bane of, these counties, that the road network is deplorable.
Yes.
Do you have some hope now after this 4-day visit?
Yes.
Oh, you do?
I would say yes. I am more hopeful than ever before.
As a result of his visit?
As a result of the visit, but also the policies the president is adopting in dealing with northeastern region or the northern region as a whole. Mainly because this is a road we've waited for 60 years. 60 years, the counties of Wajir, Mandera and Garissa have not been connected. And today we're looking at the opportunity to finally link those counties with a road network. The contractors have already been identified. Parts of the road were part of the public-private partnership to begin with. That model could not work. Now they've turned that into, they've removed the annuity or the PPP program and now have identified contractors to do. And I would say the biggest chunk of the road from inside Wajir goes through my constituency. The parts you always hear about, Modogashe to Samatar, that's my constituency.
Yes.
And then Samatar to Wajir is also in my constituency. And we believe once that road has been achieved, I know it's not going to be an overnight thing, it's going to take time. We believe opening up the region will open it up for trade, will open it up for business, and would really show that potential that we've always talked about of the region.
Right.
In contributing to the GDP of this country. We have the livestock, we have the human resource, and our land is good for cultivation, as proven in Wajir South with 7 model farms in just the past 2 years, something that's pushing down household expenditure and the prices of fruits and vegetables in the constituency. People now growing their own fruits and vegetables. That is one part, the road, and the potential it has to open up the region for business. The other part is also changing the mind. There seems to be a change in mindset on how to deal with the people of that region, not as people who should be feared and who the government should be suspicious about, but rather bona fide Kenyans who should be allowed to join mainstream Kenya. And that action the president took in Wajir, when on the day he was there, signing out or scrapping vetting for ID cards. That was a huge move, which was really welcomed across the board in the entire, not just in northern Kenya, but also all border counties in Kenya, where that's been happening, but with a special twist for the Somalis when it comes to the northeastern
Let's
region.
go into that a little bit, shall we? Because we come to, and in terms of promises of things that were being said would be done, it did start off with the road network, and then, this scrapping of the extra vetting did come in and has thrown everybody into a tailspin. So what exactly was the issue with vetting of IDs for folks in this area previously, before we come to now how things would change with the president's pronouncements?
Well, I'll say the vetting process was one of the most undignified remnants of the policies the Kenyan government has used over the years to deal with the people of northeastern Kenya, particularly. Yes, vetting happens in
everywhere
the border areas in the 5 countries that we have borders with. But the vetting that happens in northeastern was a bit more nuanced, more rigorous, to the extent that people who were bred, whose parents were born and bred in Kenya, have been denied ID cards. I have cousins, nephews and nieces that I took to university through my contacts because they would not be allowed there because of ID cards, and who finished university and could not get jobs because they've been lacking the ID cards for many years. And that is the situation that is happening across. Rigorous vetting processes at where the application is taking place. And even when your form is accepted, it has to go through the National Intelligence Service and the DCI. And sometimes it takes years for someone to get an ID card. And sometimes you may never get it. All because you are Somali or you look Somali.
Why is what I'm still trying to understand.
It's
that
fear.
if somebody says that my parents are Kenyan and they're born here and you have the relevant documentation, or are we looking at cases whereby they wouldn't have the relevant documentation in order to prove?
No. People will present the birth certificates of their parents. They will present the ID cards of their parents. They will present their school certificates, a letter from the chief. And maybe an oath from even the ancestors, with the elders sitting there, positively identifying you as somebody they know, but still, something gets stuck somewhere, and you go without it without an ID card. I mean, every other week I'm taking people to the headquarters of the National Registration Bureau with young people looking for their ID cards. I mean, for us, it is a really huge matter. And that is why once the president scrapped that, there were celebrations. In fact, I was likening it at some point to, people in Northeastern getting another Independence Day, with that single action the president took.
What is the normal vetting process that is documented and that is legal in this country? What is it that is required when somebody wants to get an ID?
Look, when you are applying for an ID card, you have to come with a letter from the chief.
Yes.
That happens across the country.
Yes.
You are also supposed to be positively identified by the chiefs and the elders who are there, as well as the government officials who are seated as the vetting committee. And you're supposed to fill the form, and then you're supposed to go through a process where, there are different layers of vetting that goes on. But once the forms live there, you have absolutely no guarantee whether you're going to get your ID card or not. Because it goes through the National Security Intelligence, and it takes, for those who are lucky, it takes months. For those who are not, it takes years.
Do you know what is strange?
And sometimes never.
Even the acquisition of a passport used to have such problems. Because you would go through all that entire process. The moment the thing was taken to, what did we call NIS then? Special branch. Again, you did not know what would happen. It was never a simple process. Now, I'm interested in understanding. The normal process we understand, a birth certificate may be required, attendance in school may be required, but what are the extra vetting requirements that Kenyans of Somali ethnicity were subjected to?
Look, our major problem is not with going through that process.
No. That's not what I'm asking.
Our major I'm coming to your question. What we have a problem with is we're being administered with policies and processes that do not adhere to other Kenyans.
Again, I am seeking to understand. Let me repeat myself.
Yes.
There are processes that Kenyans of Somali ethnicity were subjected to that other Kenyans were not subjected to.
That's our major problem.
In fact, there were times when Kenyans of Somali ethnicity, they were required to have an additional identity as beyond what we refer to as the national identity card.
It's called the Kenyan Somali verification card.
Yes. So essentially, you were a second-class citizen in your own country because it was like somebody who has an alien what?
Yeah.
Identification.
Yes.
And
like
yet
me.
you are a citizen.
Yes.
This is what I wanted you to bring out. Because when people talk about the differences, many people don't understand because they think you're just going through the process. So that's one. Secondly, even when you provide all the documentation, you still do not get the ID.
Exactly. There's no guarantee.
Yes. Well, other people get.
Yes.
So now the question is, why was that the case?
Look, the issue is because we are Somali people, and on the other side of our border is a country called Somalia, where the people who live there look exactly like us and speak the same language.
Sure.
But is that reason enough? Is that reason enough to marginalize the people of northeastern Kenya who are bona fide Kenyans, who contribute land to this country called Kenya, who are taxpayers and have also fought in the independence war for this country and have been part of the nation building process from the time we got independence until now? Is that enough? I mean, should the government segregate us? And that's what President Ruto has done away with. And that's why people in Northeastern feel that he is a different breed from the leadership we've had in Kenya since independence. And you know what? At the beginning of our conversation, I said remnants of policies the government has used to govern this region. There were instances in the past where the only interaction we had with the government was, soldiers coming to burn our villages and kill our people. There have been massacres, the Malkamari massacre in Mandera. We had the Wagala massacre in Wajir. We had the Garissa massacre. And so many atrocities. Communal punishment, collective punishment was one of the policies the government used. But over the years, with democracy and multi-party politics, and the new constitution of 2010, things improved somewhat. But there were lingering policies, such as that one. And another one, which is the failure of the governments to do away with the Indemnity Act, which indemnifies those who carried out
the atrocities
in Northeastern.
Mohammed, may I ask you, so the extra vetting that CAP has been removed by the president, essentially, I'm sure there'll be a lot of policy work that needs to follow. But then how would it work now for folks, because you mentioned two things, that there are folks on the other side of the border who look like us and they speak the same language as we do. How then it's easy to cross, just like with any border, anywhere in the world.
Absolutely.
So we cross over, there's no line, you can just cross over. How would you be able to then ensure, and this is another question that came up after that, how would you be able to ensure that you're not just giving IDs with the extra vetting removed to people who are not Kenyan? Who look like us and speak like us?
The onus, again, is on the people of Northeastern to ensure that this removal of the vetting process is not abused. And again, it doesn't also mean that there will be, that we have chiefs, we have government officials who are involved in the processes of issuing these ID cards. They also have to go through, they have to ensure and carry out, any requirements that are necessary to ensure that no foreigners are given. But again, why don't we just go through the same system other Kenyans are going through? If somebody has presented his birth certificate issued at the time of birth in a Kenyan hospital, the person presents the birth certificates of his parents, presents the school certificates. Is that not enough to know that he is a bona fide Kenyan? We have other documents.
Okay.
And can be all positively identified by the chief, who gives him a letter and says, I know this person.
And that should suffice.
Of course.
Okay.
Just two questions. First, you're right. There's been quite a lot of historical issues. If you go back to the 70s, there's the whole Shifta War. There's whole Somalia, when it had desires in Somalia, the state, not the people, had desires in Ethiopia and part of Kenya. The recidivism, then you get to the 2010s, you've got the whole Al-Shabaab thing and things like that.
And extrajudicial killings.
And extrajudicial killings and things like that. So there's a lot of history that is not so positive towards the north on both sides of the divide. Now, the question that lingers is two. One, what percentage of young people seeking IDs are not getting them? And B, you said a very powerful thing. You said that the community needs to be in charge and needs to step up, because the government really cannot make sure that everyone being registered is local.
It's Kenyan.
Yeah. But at the same time, please speak to, because these are the same communities that are targeted by terror attacks. Schools are closed, chiefs are abducted and things like that. And the whole process of identification, and I'm not talking now just about the ID document, I'm talking about identification. So, for example, In Luyaland, my name is Bichachi. I have more Bichachis in Uganda who are distant relatives than I have Bichachis in Kenya, as an example. So the idea of identity, identifying cultural roots, identifying what someone adheres to in terms of radicalization and things like that. How do you see that coming into focus moving forward? Like, what should the NIS actually do to actually be able to help the community self-identify, self-regulate, so that they are now policing instead of intervening? So, question: what percentage of youth are missing IDs, and then how you going to handle that moving forward?
Look, in terms of how many young people are missing out on IDs, a great number are missing out on
percentage.
I don't have the statistics, but
Ballpark?
a big
5
number.
out of 10, 6 out of 10.
No, almost half.
Wow, that's big.
Almost half of those who register do not get, if not more.
Because of this issue.
Because of the vetting process and also the delays that, at some point people give up. At some point people give up. You will see a 60-year-old Kenyan Somali who has never had an ID card. It's quite, a common thing to see. So a great number do. So many people are missing out. Number two, how can the community take part in ensuring that this process is not abused? That's your question, if I paraphrase it.
Not necessarily abused.
Yes.
Because you see, when you say abused, you automatically assume negativity.
Yes.
The process of identification is not just about someone is Somali. It's about
it's
criminality.
It's very rare.
Yes.
For somebody from Somalia to be able to present their birth certificate, the birth certificate and ID cards of their parents. Very rare.
But that's not my question. My question is actually totally different.
Yes.
I moved from the ID question because I think that's a right? If you're born here, you cannot be born with suspicion.
Yes.
Of you're born here.
And that's what we've been.
So
that's how it's been.
That I've moved completely out
Yes.
of. I'm speaking about the security, and perhaps I should frame it this way, right? I did some work with the NCIC in Moyale, and one of the problems, one of the clans had fights. Okay. And I remember one of the elders came to speak and said it is wrong for you to say Clan A is fighting Clan B, because it's not all of us who come out of our houses
To fight.
We know there are XYZ people, and he said one is a politician, named him, another one is this, he's the one who's funding this. So when I talk about identification, I'm talking about taking from the point where you're saying that the community is taking responsibility. That's a key thing. Just the same way as the Nyumba Kumi concept is saying, I am neighbor to CT, I should be aware whether he is selling illegal buffalo meat in his house. So I'm saying, how do you see that?
Aren't we doing that already?
No, that's what I wanted to hear.
The Kenyan-Somalia border, 700 kilometers long,
Yes.
is probably the most porous border
Yes.
in the region. Yet the incidents of people crossing over to cause havoc have been quite few compared to how porous it is, because the people are working with the government.
Okay.
We have been the first line of defense
defense.
for Kenya
So that's
for
the
a very long
Yes.
time.
So you use
That's
that
a
word.
story
You
that
use
needs to
that
be
word
told.
defense, and that's one of the issues that comes up, isn't it? That we cannot run away from the fact that there have been security
course.
issues. There have been security issues, and that is what lends greatly to the issue of the vetting, not necessarily because of marginalization or that there was a disconnect between the northern part of the country and other parts, because does this, and I'm going to the question,
Yes.
where does the security issue come in all of this? That the questions connected directly with the porous borders that you've raised just now, where does all of that play in line with the security issue?
Any border, however porous or not porous, can present security challenges to any nation anywhere. We're not the only community that spills over borders.
Mm-hmm. That's very true.
How has the Kenyan government dealt with other communities in a more dignified way?
Mm.
Why are we being subjected to the indignity of vetting when we believe we are part and parcel
the
of
question
this
I would
country?
ask,
why do we have to go through all these hoops and loops?
the question I would ask is, if you're talking marginalization, that's where I would begin. And I would ask, when we talk about the coastal region and the people who are there being marginalized, are they marginalized the same as the Somalis? The answer would be no. They share certain commonalities, but they are not. If we talk about areas that border, say, the Mara and beyond, or you're talking about Western Kenya, and those people who have borders, or you're talking about the Pokot, who border maybe the Karamajong, are we saying, or people who come from Mount Elgon, are we saying that some of these areas who have stated themselves that they were marginalized, is it the same? The answer is no.
Yeah.
And yet, all these areas have people, they share commonality of ethnicity with people across the borders in the other country. So you've spoken of Moyale. The people in Moyale are predominantly Borana, Gabra. That's them, okay? But why is it that we do not hear of the same? And yet that entire region actually experience what you call marginalization, economic marginalization, and probably any sort of marginalization you can think of. That narrative must have been pushed by some people.
Exactly. And you can tell that narrative is holding water when you look at the reaction of many Kenyans
after
the president's move to scrap vetting.
Let's take a break on that
amount
note,
of xenophobia that was poured onto social media platforms was out of this world, and only shows that this is more systemic, more,
And do you really believe that is the only issue? Why it's a xenophobic issue, as opposed to some of the other things that have come about?
It's fear-mongering. And I know the Somalis are taking over. You've seen it in churches. You've seen it with the politicians, who prescribe to Rigathi Gachagwa's mentality. Talking about it.
I mean, we can bet also that, one of the major issues that comes is one I've mentioned before, because we cannot run away, as tender and as sensitive as it is, we cannot run away from the fact that when we look at very many activities, and we're not even talking about the Kenyan side, we're talking about the Somali side. We're talking about the fact that insecurity has been a major issue. When we want to look at things like Al-Shabaab, when we want to look at terrorism, where KDF has been stationed for years, that is an issue. And somebody wants to ask the question and say, are we then opening it up for anybody to come into the country? And I think that is one thing that, again, as sensitive as it is, we cannot run away from.
Can I also add on to this and say, before we went into Somali, many of these problems we did not have. Nope. We did not.
No, we did not.
We had problems, but not of the nature that we see.
It's not when you treat people the way they were treating them, or the way they are treating still in some cases, with suspicion and fear.
Okay, so like you can't treat everybody like everybody's a terrorist.
They are not going to work with you. They're not going to be, cooperative and all that. So we're saying it's the wrong way of dealing with people.
Okay,
it's when you bring people in to the mainstream society
and make the community feel like it's part of a solution, not treat it like
that is when we will defeat those who want to carry out these attacks and foment.
Let's look into that a little bit more in terms of solutions, because if anything, we must have a solution-oriented conversation, and the community has to come into this conversation here. So beyond what the president said, how is the community actually going to work to make sure that it happens? Because the president can say anything. He can say anything, but in terms of making it work moving forward, something totally different. So let's take a break on that note if we can. Wajir South Member of Parliament is our guest this hour, and we're looking at the scrapping of extra vetting in the northeastern region of this country and saying, okay, so what does it mean moving forward? Wajir South Member of Parliament is our guest this hour, and we're looking at, this whole scrapping of vetting issue, and beyond that, the messages, subliminal or otherwise, in terms of what that could actually mean. CT?
There is something that one sees. It's a colonial hangover. But it is an economically charged and propelled ethnic hubris. When you found the colonialists and they were in charge, there was a hubris that went with the manner in which they governed the country. At independence, those who were economically charged and those who had economic ability and who had proven to be good at it were the Kenyan Asians of that community. Yeah. Over time, local Kenyans became adept and grew to a point where you could actually say this particular community, and in our case, it was the Kikuyu who were seen first as those who became economic powers. And they were all over the country. Yeah. The same thing that the Asians had done. Yeah. In the era that we now live, we see Kenyans of Somali ethnicity doing that.
Yes.
Throughout these times, when the Kenyan Asian was at the forefront, there were always negative narratives about the community. And I say the hubris because part of the negative communication and narratives arose from hubris that was communicated by those who felt they were better. And it came this way. It is us who are uplifting the economy. Without us, the economy of this country would not be where it is. Now, when that is stated, what it sounds like to the other, God knows how many other communities in the country, they say, so the rest of us are doing nothing. Is that what you are suggesting? Negative communication and negative narratives often have these economic issues at the backdrop of it.
And you see, Siti, you're so right. There's something that is dangerous in this country, and that is the opinion of an entire tribe as one thing. There was one time I complained at the airport. I was called a Luo. Na nikaambiwa, nyinyi wa Jaluo, what is wrong with you? Because I complained.
What had you done?
Yeah?
You're vocal.
Yes, and I was vocal at the time when the president was a Kikuyu, and the person complaining happened to be a Kikuyu. I'm not a Luo, but Luos are the ones who complain. There's something very important. We must realize there's someone called a terrorist. He is not a tribe.
Exactly.
Right? There's someone called an illegal voter. He's not a tribe. There's someone called a thief. He's not a tribe. And you do not solve those problems via ID cards. Because it's not like an ID card is a magical thing that can suddenly, if you don't have it, decline you from going through the porous border, as they do, and then going to Kilifi, Lamu, and the rest to plant IDs. Number 2, City. Our intelligence service, our police, our IEBC. You cannot convince me that the people who have successfully stopped attack after attack, that we don't hear about, that we do not have Dusit D2 again. Westgate is many years ago, it has reopened. Then we say that the identity card is the only tool they have to do their work. It is not true. We should understand, and Mheshimiwa, I'll hold you to this. Society has the role to discipline its own members.
Yes.
Okay? That's where it starts. Security starts at home. But we cannot discriminate on the basis that there are Bichachis in Uganda, then you assume all Bichachis speak loudly like me. So, Mheshimiwa, that is a...
yes, Bichachi. You're so right, and you've hit the nail on the head. To be honest with you, we are looking at the issuance of ID cards as a means unto itself in terms of curbing insecurity and stopping the hotheads that want to cause havoc in our country. But this is just a document. Yet, you are treating the people who are living at the border, who should be your first line of defense, and who've always
who you
been,
should invite to actually help you in this war.
Exactly.
Okay.
Who've always been at the forefront of ensuring that this country is secure. You're treating them badly. You're calling them names. You're calling them terrorists. You do not differentiate between them and the person who went into Dusit and killed our people, the person who went into Westgate and killed our people. And when it is coming, not just from members of the public who are writing on social media platforms, it's coming from leaders like Natembeya of Tanzania, the governor, or the former vice president of Kenya, Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka. And this has always been the issue. Do not look at the ID and see to it as the only thing that can stop, our country from insecurity, but look at the people who are living at the frontier where the danger is coming from, and stop identifying the people on the other side of the border the same way you're identifying the people who are living inside the country. And again,
yes,
to be honest, we're done apologizing. Somalis are good in business. Somalis are very hardworking people. If they're making headways in the business sector, and somebody somewhere is concerned about something to the extent that this xenophobia is now making its way to the churches, and people like the former deputy president, who have a very little respect for, to be honest with you, because somebody of his stature should identify himself more as a national leader. And who said that he had left the government because all security organs had been, the leadership of all security organs had been taken over by Somalis. I mean, he did not leave the government. First, he was forced out. Secondly, if this is a democracy and a real meritocracy, where merit reigns supreme, the people who run our security organs are there by merit.
Okay.
They are decorated officers who have not skipped one step of the ladder.
Okay. I want to hear from you, Moshima. So now, obviously, the president spoke, right? And taking all of these things that we've said into consideration, the president spoke, and that means now, sadly, policy will have to follow his pronouncement. Perhaps it would have been the other way.
Indeed. And I'm looking forward to have it in Parliament. So we pass.
Exactly.
Or reject whatever needs to be rejected.
So policy will follow this pronouncement.
Yes.
But from what we are saying, it is very clear, according to what you've said, that some of the documentation that is required for this, vetting, because everybody goes through it. CT talked about how, in different parts of the country, you're going to go through it anyway. They're going to ask you certain questions. You must deliver, right? So how do you see communities coming into place to help to build this policy whereby you need the verification? You do need it. Everybody who's getting an ID in this country, like we've seen many people on the comments this morning, you do need it. You're not just going to rock up and say, well, I'm Kenyan, and they hand you the document. It's not going to happen, right? No. So how will communities right now then be able to assist to make sure that, yes, in the event that you do not have that document, like you said, the chiefs are there, the clans can take an oath, like you say. How will all of those things come together to form policy to make this exercise a little less painful?
Listen, the government has been applying the wrong policies before, and that has had ramifications. Choices have consequences. Since independence, the people of that region have been dealt with very roughly, from massacres to name any, atrocities and crimes against humanity. Now, the key to what we are seeking, which is safety and stability, is inclusivity. Bring in those people from the cold. Stop administering a different set of rules and laws that do not have any effect on the other part of Kenya. Stop treating them like second-class citizens. And only then, once inclusivity takes hold. We've been playing our role despite the exclusion.
I understand this, but my question is
clear. And we are ready to play our role.
My question is very different. I am saying, because you said it here, in the event that somebody needs to go through the process and there's a documentation that you do not have. You don't have it. It's not a matter of, you don't have it. This is what they need. You don't have it.
Yes.
How are communities going to join government, because it's government essentially that's giving you this document? How will communities then be able to play the part and join this policy whereby we say, in the event that you don't have the document, will we have conforming, cooperative members of the community who are going to be able to come in and say, yes, this is actually somebody
I would assure you that we are ready to play our role. And again, I'll repeat again, we've already been playing our role.
Okay.
Even despite this, in spite of how we've been treated, in spite of all these rules that do not apply to other Kenyans having, being used in the region, we have already been playing out, and we are ready to go a step further, go the extra mile to ensure that we protect our country as we've always been protecting, and even beyond.
You know, the beauty of this conversation, it broadens the discussion around the process of marginalization which we institutionalize in this country against many communities.
Yes.
And the Kenyans of Somali ethnicity issue points to something that should have been rectified a long time ago and hasn't.
You know, City, in Kibra, there's a community called the Nubian.
The Nubians.
Nubian.
Yes.
That spent years not being identified as Kenyans.
More than 50 years.
And yet they live in the heart of the city.
Yes.
Okay? And they have been dispossessed of land because of that.
Land which was genuinely apportioned to them by the authority of that particular time.
Yes.
It was given to them.
And then on top of that, not just losing land. When they lost the land, they lost the economic empowerment. So they've had generations of poverty because the government refused to do right by them. And I keep telling people, separate the evil people from a community. And
Mark,
every place I've gone,
the
where there's
Nubians
issues.
have the same problem of identification like the Kenyans of Somali ethnicity.
Yes,
Believe me,
exactly.
The same process.
Same.
And the thing is, we keep identifying people with a community. And I remember every place I've ever gone, City, where communities have been called cattle rustlers. I talked to a woman and she said, Mimi si mwizi wa ng'ombe. Why don't I have a road? You know, so there's clear focus in my mind. Separate bad people from a tribe and a religion. Those things are very different.
Yes, it's difficult though.
It is difficult.
Yeah.
And even as we wrap up this conversation, Reshima, what would you hope to see? In a short bit, what would you hope to see in the next, because it's probably going to be very quick. What do you hope to see?
Well, I hope to see a more inclusive Kenya, because in inclusivity lies our salvation. And we are a nation that is more or less a jumble of ethnic groups,
Right.
drawing in different directions, whose only knowledge of the next ethnic group is just the stereotypes that we like, brandishing around on the streets.
I hear you.
We need to be a more cohesive nation that feels for each other. A landslide in Muranga should cause a lot of pain in Mandera.
Absolutely.
A ferry sinking in
capsize.
Lake Victoria should be a concern for the whole nation. We need to draw together and unite for the sake of this country, because we don't have a spare country.
Indeed. Wajir South Member of Parliament, Mohammed Adow, has been our guest this hour. Thank you for joining us.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.